All right, everyone, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to say thank you so much for attending this MLK Scholar presentation/performance. My name is Molly McInerney. I am the Assistant Director for Community Learning in the ICEO, and I'm here giving opening remarks on behalf of Beatrice Cantata, who unfortunately couldn't be here today in her role as the Director of Engagement for Diversity and Inclusion. So before we dive in deeper into our presenters, and I want to make some remarks about acknowledging folks who are here in support of our program. First, I'm going to call out our program team for this MLK Scholars program. We have Polina Wolf and Alejandro Ramos. We have some ICEO and Mind, Hand, Heart colleagues in attendance today. Dario Slotty, Chad Galtz, I think I saw Marianne Kirkbride, as well as our Vice President for Equity Inclusion, Carl Reed. We appreciate you coming and attending today. I'd also like to show my appreciation for our AV services team. We have a little bit more complicated setup today, and things sound and look amazing, so thank you for that. And we'll also show appreciation from our senior leaders, Provost Cynthia Barnhart, and the former Interim Institute Community and Equity Officer, Dan Hastings. And a special thank you to the faculty host, DMSC's Professor Christine Ortiz. And last but not least, we have some MLK scholars joining us in person and virtually today. Jean-Luc Perry, Angelino Viceza, Christine Taylor Butler, Tawana Dillahunt, and Morgane Koenig. All right, so a couple of reminders. Note, please, that this session will be recorded. If you need captions, they can be enabled right now on Zoom. However, we appreciate if you can stay muted. For folks who are joining virtually, Polina is monitoring chat, and she's going to paste an Uber Eats voucher, so lunch is on us. Please enjoy, and you can use that within the next couple of business days. And if you'd like to stay up to date on other MLK events and programs, please subscribe to the ICEO newsletter. That's at iceo.mit.edu, and you'll get some periodic information there. And our next event and our last Scholar of the Year will be Wasulu Jaco on April 23rd. Information is forthcoming later this week, and we hope you can join us. And that will be hybrid virtually, as well as the Hayden Library Nexus. So without further ado, I have a series of introductions for our presenters today. Our first is our MLK scholar, Denise Frazier. Dr. Denise Frazier is an educator, musician, and disciplinary artist from Houston who has lived and worked in New Orleans since 2002. She is also assistant director of the New Orleans Center for the Gulf South, a place-based research center at Tulane University that grants fellowships and organizes public programming, immersive experiences, and collective contemplation about the bioregion stretching from Texas to Florida and its connections with other regions around the world. Her research interests currently include the Gulf South and the Anthropocene, sound studies, and the political, social, digital, natural, and built environments of the Gulf South and Circum-Caribbean. She is also the manager, co-founder, and violinist, vocalist, percussionist of Les Senel, a string and technological interfacing ensemble that performs African diasporic music through a prismatic lens that honors African and Indigenous ancestors and chronicles ecological realities. As a company member of Goat in the Road Productions, Frazier has used her skills as an actor and as a musical composer in immersive performances and collaborations that tell lesser-known stories surrounding sexuality, politics, liberation, and colonialism. Dr. Frazier completed her master's and PhD in Latin American Studies department at Tulane University, studying the political and social dimensions of hip-hop music and performance in early 21st century Cuba and Brazil. And she is the proud parent of one son, and I believe family is here, and so a special acknowledgement to Dr. Frazier. Thank you so much for joining us. And for our next two presenters, the co-collaborators today, we have Dr. Ellen Sparrow and Dr. Christine Ortiz, as well as Les Senel, Joseph Darensberg, and Peter Bowling. Everyone, let me just Some background on Dr. Ellen Sparrow. She is a historian of science and technology at MIT in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. Through the focus of materials, Sparrow's research focuses on the ways that people envision human progress through the systems, institutions, infrastructures, and narratives that they create. As a historian working at the intersection of technology, business, and higher education, Dr. Sparrow's work leverages the past, driven by pressing challenges of the present, toward more equitable and sustainable materials futures. Sparrow brings expertise and collaboration for bridging disciplines, in particular between history and the social studies of science and technology, with applications in science and engineering practice. Dr. Sparrow participates in international research communities across disciplines and serves on several nonprofit boards. Dr. Sparrow holds degrees across disciplines, including materials related to Bachelor and Masters of Science from Cornell University in Fiber Science, and a Master's of Arts from the Fashion Institute of Technology, and PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in History, Anthropology, Science, Technology, and Society. And our final presenter is Dr. Ortiz. Dr. Ortiz is the Morris Cohen Professor of Materials Science and Engineering at MIT, where she has made pioneering advancements in the areas of biotechnology, biomaterials, and nanotechnology. The author of more than 200 scholarly publications, she has supervised research projects across multiple academic disciplines, received 30 national and international honors, including the Presidential Early Career Award in Science and Engineering, awarded to her by President George W. Bush, and served as the Dean for Graduate Education at MIT from 2010 to 2016. She is the founder of an innovative nonprofit post-secondary educational institution, Station One. Dr. Ortiz earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and a Master of Science degree and a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Cornell University, each in the fields of materials science and engineering. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I guess that as we open up our presentation, I'm going to hand over the mic here, and I guess we can go ahead and get started. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. As is our practice at the North American Indian Center of Boston, we must first recognize the land that we're on, the land that holds us, the land that sustains us. And here on this land, we recognize it as sacred to several of our local tribes, the Wampanoag, the Nipmuc, the Massachusetts, the Abenaki. And acknowledging the lands, we are making agreements with our host nations. And to elaborate on that, I want to take us to the Gulf South and the words from Wabancha Collective. We never wanted to be a sacrifice zone for white supremacy and thoughtlessness. We just wanted to live our lives. We kept pulling back, moving downriver, hiding in the swamps, surviving and thriving in the harsh but beautiful landscape. The Atchafalaya region is a national treasure. I so fiercely love the lands there, the place that we call Yakanichifu, the big land. They are key breeding grounds for many migratory birds. Pretty much every single migratory bird on this eastern seaboard passes through our swamps. It must be protected. We are here, fighting to be heard. No greenwashing, no more false solutions. Uphold indigenous sovereignty. No more pipelines, take out the old pipes, and land and sovereignty back. Tikach, Jean-Luc Purit, Tunica Biloxi Tribe of Louisiana, President of North American Indian Center of Boston. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. I want to thank ICEO, Paulina, Molly, Beatriz, thank the AV folks, and thank you all for being here and for this wonderful food and experience we'll have with each other. This presentation is about a chemical, the chemical creosote. It's a coal-based tar that is used as a wood preserver. Dr. Ortiz, Dr. Sparrow, and myself are working together to develop an interdisciplinary approach to examining the unintended consequences of industry and its intersections with the environmental, biological health, and culture of the Gulf South region through the chemical creosote as one of many examples of how the people in the Gulf South region are living, resisting, and entangled with chemical plants. A useful framing for this understanding is through the term Anthropocene. It's the scientific coined geological age where human activity has had a dominant influence on climate and the environment. Our purpose for this research project is to understand how the chemical creosote and larger conceptual frameworks like plantation economies, environmental racism, and geographical considerations like the Mississippi River and proximity to urban centers intersect with each other. So let me help you all get more grounded in the region, very far from here. The Gulf South region is characterized by the 4 states that hug the southeastern coastal area of the United States. Those states are Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. Oh, okay. Oh, good. I don't need to be double mic today. Y'all can hear me. Forgot it was there. So I've spent the past 7 years researching and programming educational experiences that chronicle the petrochemical landscape in southeastern Louisiana, developing musical compositions with Les Sanel, Joseph Derensberg, and Peter Bowling. And these compositions have been inspired by environmental activist organizations like Rise St. James and the Residents of Gordon Plaza and the Descendants Projects. Organizations that are aware of the intersecting plantation to petrochemical plant industries. The Gulf South is a region where the petrochemical industry has overturned the soil that was once tended to by enslaved Africans in colonial plantation economies. My attention turned to creosote around 3 years ago after completing an ethnographic article based on the community of Fifth Ward, Houston. All of my work research and music-based activism that has saturated my professional and personal life in New Orleans also deeply affected my immediate family in Houston and my grandparents, cousins, and aunts, all of whom resided in Fifth Ward and lived close to the Union Pacific Rail Yard, the site where creosote contamination was first spotted. So my colleague Ellen will talk a little bit more about creosote, and then I will talk more about Fifth Ward and how this toxic plume, which has affected more than 8,000 acres of land, has impacted the community. We're not done.
This is
We're not
going to
done.
be lots of seamless transitioning. So don't worry about the acknowledgement that we appreciate that you're paying attention. Thank you, Denise. And I'd like to also acknowledge our collaborator, Christine Ortiz, who's in the audience, and her work really is woven throughout our presentation, even though she is not going to be up here in front of you speaking. So in these images, you can see creosote considered across scale as a socio-technical system. So really thinking about this interconnection between people, cultures, land, different types of technologies and technological systems, and especially materials, is one of the ways that we approach our collaborative research. So on the left side, you can see the materials that are going to be combined, coal and tar and wood, because as you know, creosote was designed as a wood preservative. So to enable the longevity of wood structures to be used in large scale infrastructures like transportation and telecommunications. And here on the right side, you get a glimpse into what the working world of processing these materials might look like. So these are taken from a plant elsewhere in Texas, in Somerville, Texas, not too far away, at the beginning of the 20th century. And you can see also many of the workers here are predominantly African descendant. And you see this combination of chemical materials, natural, processed into this kind of new technology, and a glimpse into our contemporary world on the lower image, which is the burning of creosote treated railroad ties in North Carolina. So I want to keep this types of image in perspective, as Denise will continue to bring us into some of the cultural context by thinking across this as a socio-technical system.
Awesome. Fifth Ward Houston is actually close to downtown Houston. It is a district submerged in the southern memory of a sprawling port city. Its 19th century inception consisted of residents from Eastern Europe, Russia, and other religious groups who were fleeing persecution. Another way to describe Fifth Ward is much closer to the Fifth Ward that I knew as a child. An African-American Fifth Ward, and more personally, my grandparents' neighborhood. The growing prosperity of an early 20th century oil booming Houston had soon turned the neighborhood into an economic haven, attracting African-Americans from rural Louisiana and East Texas. So very much a part of the Great Migration. Within the past 2 decades, Latinx communities have populated the area, transforming the previously majority African-American ward. And my father's mother, Emola Taylor Frazier, was born outside of Sweet Union in Lufkin County, which is in East Texas as well. My father explains what his maternal grandfather, D.H. Taylor, said about growing up in the area. He was a farmer. As a young man, he was a deacon in the church. He told me when he got on his knees to pray to God, he always made sure his knife was always open in his pocket. You never felt safe anywhere, whether it's from other people who lived in the city or police. He eventually came to Houston. They saw Houston as a better place to at least get a better life. And that's how many ended up in Fifth Ward in the late 1940s. In Houston-bound Culture and Color in a Jim Crow city, Taina Steptoe writes, once a sleepy town on the banks of Buffalo Bayou, interwar Houston was a bustling city with little memory of its former status as a frontier community on the western edge of Dixie. The railroad yards and ship channel docks held the promise of wage labors for farmers and sharecroppers, and thousands responded. They headed southwest to Houston. Using the red dirt roads of East Texas, they traveled westward from the flood-ravaged swamps of lower Louisiana. Here's my father. The product of Southern racial segregation in a very different Fifth Ward than the one I knew. So we're thinking about 50s versus the 80s. Legendary Texas figures like Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, civil rights activist Mickey Leland, boxer George Foreman, and several juke joints, R&B clubs, and a tight-knit community where, according to my father, education was the best because most of his teachers, women of African descent, were not allowed to work in other industries. So their intelligence went into teaching African-American children in the neighborhood. This professional limitation proved also to have its benefits. In 1979, when my father was in his late 20s, and 1 year before I was born, the Southern Pacific Railroad, which owned and operated the facility, built a clay-lined surface waste impoundment located on the southwest end of the site to store creosote containing soil, tank bottoms, and debris from an inactive wastewater lagoon. Let me go back, sorry. In 1983, so just giving you all a sense of the timeline, the Southern Pacific Railroad built and completed a new on-site waste storage area for creosote contamination. So there was contaminated soil and creosote materials. 14 years later, in 1997, Union Pacific acquired Southern Pacific and assumed responsibility for cleaning up the on-site waste storage area for the creosote contaminated material. The mismanagement of this contaminated material caused a toxic plume to contaminate the surrounding communities from the Union Pacific rail yard on Liberty Road. And I'll show you all a map of that later. So the soil and groundwater contamination was discovered by residents and verified by the EPA, the City of Houston, and also researchers at Texas A&M University. And in 2002, the year I graduated from college and moved to New Orleans, former Southern Pacific Railroad employees of the site filed a lawsuit alleging that exposure to creosote was the cause of various health impacts. In Abraham versus Union Pacific Railroad Company, a year later, my grandmother died of stomach cancer. 7 years after that, my grandfather died of cancer-related causes. My father had nose cancer and survived. And in 2021, my aunt died from COVID complications and possibly cancer-related stomach problems. And I think we can transition to.
Okay, so we're going to put this a little bit more into a materials-focused context. And so you can see here that the technology of creosote predates the formalization of materials science and engineering as a discipline that we know today. And this work on creating materials to preserve wood for ships started in the early 18th century. And as we mentioned earlier, creosote is a materials technology that was designed to enhance the longevity of wood. And with this comes both intended and unintended chemical consequences. So throughout this 300 years of wood preserving technology, of which creosote is one, we can come back to our materials science tetrahedron here to think about materials processing and how these properties were optimized. So technical properties optimized that you can see here, biological, chemical, mechanical, and physical properties. And on the top right, you can see the hierarchical structure of wood, a complex natural material. And on the lower corner, an image from a confocal microscope that shows the mechanism of wood preservative, a cross-section here seeing the surface penetration of wood preservative into this structure. So when we're thinking about creosote and the socio-technical systems, material entanglements, we're thinking about complex intermolecular interactions between thousands of molecules and components of wood, cellulose, and lignin. And this is also kind of what makes us interested in this complexity. We're thinking about the expansion of railroad infrastructure and these materials that are supporting all of this development, what at the time was called progress, what for us, we continue to think with some of these tensions in the larger costs of technologies that are related to each other, right? So it can't just be taken alone in isolation by itself, but that wood preserving technologies were also related to these large chains of events, large chains of socio-technical systems and entanglement. And here are some of the structures of coal tar creosote. So there are approximately 300 chemicals that are major in this compositional mix, but up to 10,000 can be found within a typical mixture. So it's predominantly made of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. But one of the things that makes this so challenging is that these PAHs both have low and high molecular weights. The lows are especially easy to diffuse, especially through soil. And remediation becomes more challenging in this context because of the heterogeneity of this system. So there's no predominant chemical structure to look for and filter out. We have so many things going on here. And when we think of the ways that contamination happens, so it's not only the diffusion of small molecules, but also the fracture of these treated wood pieces. So you can think of that a little bit like microplastics that we might be a little bit more familiar with. breaking up and diffusing into the environment. And this question of trying to make a new material with the goal of longevity and kind of perseverance of a material might also make us think of another contemporary challenge, forever chemicals, that has a similar kind of both promise and peril associated with it. And so we're constantly thinking in this long time horizon about materials and culture.
And so here's a slightly aerial shot of the rail yard, and just to get you all grounded in the space. So this is Fifth Ward and Kashmir Gardens, which is very close to Fifth Ward. You can see, you have Texas and Houston, and then this is a specific community. This is where the creosote treatment and rail yard is. And so where a lot of the creosote was found, and this kind of line dividing is Liberty Road, where the rail yard, where creosote was found and treated. And this is from the Houston Health Department, so you can see the biological impacts of creosote and how it tracks in different parts of Fifth Ward. Okay, and now I'm going to play a video about there was some more chemicals that were found. So there's active testing going on right now. So this video is actually from like 2 weeks ago.
Well, good evening. We begin tonight with poisoned land in the Fifth Ward.
The EPA has now identified dozens of toxic chemicals. In testing these samples, people living in what's been called a cancer cluster are now reacting to that news. Fox 26's Sherman DeSell joining us live from that area to break down this new data. Sherman.
Yeah, good evening. A total of 41 chemicals tied to creosote were found in these samples. It's something that the residents say they've been dealing with for quite some time. The Environmental Protection Agency released new data this week identifying over 40 potential contaminants of concern in the Fifth Ward area. They're related to creosote, the toxic chemical found on the former wood-preserving site once operated by Southern Pacific. Union Pacific Railroad assumed ownership in 1997. Neighbors here who have dealt with rare and deadly cancer diagnoses for decades were told in years past no concerns were found.
I already knew this. This is why we push to have these tests done. We living out here. We know something is wrong. People are not just dropping dead.
Fox 26 was here in November when the EPA began advanced testing of the soil, gas, groundwater, and sewers. They tell us over 117 locations were sampled. Local environmentalist Jackie Metcalf says that these are not the type of chemicals people should be coming in contact with. The report reads benzene was detected, which is associated with leukemia and other blood disorders, according to the National Cancer Institute. The EPA says many of these levels exceed government standards.
These types of gases at the levels they were found would not be safe in an industrial setting, let alone in a household setting. This is the first time that I've seen the testing show this many types of gases at exceedances in the community.
The city approved $5 million to help with the voluntary relocation of residents. At the same time, new development emerges. Some residents are just relieved to know their voices are being heard.
We knew that they were high. We just couldn't prove it. And now that the proof is out there, now what is the next step?
So the next phase of testing, which is set to be more extensive, will happen towards the summertime, but the EPA will have a next community meeting set for April. We're live in Fifth Ward. Sherman DeSell, Fox 26 News.
So there's a lot of competing interests with this issue. There are community members who want to know what's going on, who want some accountability. There's also, of course, the city of Houston that is concerned about this. And there's real estate and the fact that Fifth Ward is now increasingly becoming a gentrified area. According to Houston Landing, the hazardous pollutants seeped into the soil, creating a plume of contaminated groundwater below the site, where they said 117 houses now sit. And so though Fifth Ward residents have sounded alarms about unusually high rates of cancer within the area for years, the city has historically taken little action to halt development or alert potential renters and buyers in and around the site. Between 2018 and 2023, Houston's permitting department approved 1,500 single-family homes, duplexes, and apartment complexes within the cancer cluster's code areas. And we were just in Houston a few months ago and noticed all of the new construction along the rail yard. So Fifth Ward in Houston, environmentalists and environmental activists, academics, and artists are very interested in telling the stories of people in this community, from this community, and how this chemical is altering and has altered the landscape. The Houston Climate Justice Museum and Cultural Center, featured in an exhibition called Creosote Stories, was curated by researchers Willow Curry, Aaron Ambroso, and Tiffany Jin. And they've been gathering real-time stories from residents and activists in the neighborhood. Organizations like Bayou City Waterkeeper and Seer Coalition for Environmental Equity and Resistance are working with the Fifth Ward Environmental Alliance to fight for residents' rights and relocation and reparations for the consideration of the Fifth Ward Cancer Cluster as a Superfund site that requires remediation. On February 7th, 2024, the Houston City Council voted to move forward with a voluntary relocation plan for families living near the cancer cluster. There are about 40 Fifth Ward families who would be eligible for this program, but council members said that 9 have opted in. So ahead of the vote, the new mayor of Houston, Mayor John Whitmire, said he heard from several residents that they were worried that the relocation plan was an effort to take their land and gentrify the area, as there is still development and redevelopment going on. So new construction has been rooted in the strip of land close to the contaminated rail yard. Homes are selling for over $300,000. An immersive art experience, Meow Wolf, will also soon be in Fifth Ward. As this place changes, our research questions will chronicle the rapid pace with which community will change in the next decade and beyond. How do we chronicle the experiences of the majority African descendant and Latinx communities that have shaped Fifth Ward culture for the past 8 decades? How do we understand the trajectory of materials and chemicals as critical components of socio-technical systems through their auditory signatures across industrial and cultural heritage? Through the lens of materials and sound, together, how might we better understand the lived experience of being proximate to industrial chemicals?
And so at the heart of this interdisciplinary work is translation across disciplines, regions, cultures, thinking across time. And so some of the things that we are taking from this type of project into thinking with the development of new materials and ongoing materials research is how, when natural systems are taken out of their evolved function, they can become toxic. Right? Very often we're thinking about petrochemicals, or we started with the petrochemical landscape, but sometimes we're separated from just that those are materials that are part of the earth, that are transformed in lots of different ways. And it's after being taken out of evolved function that toxicity begins to emerge, and we're still understanding so much of this. And the impacts of first, second, and third order causal chains of technological development. So how these large-scale technological systems, thinking about the railways, about communication infrastructure, about the built environment of manufacturing, of urban settlement, comes with all of these complex materials and material relationships between culture and physicality. And thinking with culture at the heart and all of that multiplicity that comes out of there, we are also considering what will the remediation future look like, and how any kind of remediation or a gesture towards technological solutions need to really draw upon and align with existing cultural practices and frameworks. And so a knowledge of both what our contemporary questions are, how did we get here, and how can we think together forward through material relationships and cultural relationships is where we're looking. And so I will invite you to the concluding part of this presentation, which is through music. So I will introduce Les Senel, an electroacoustic-based musical ensemble named after the 19th century Afro-Creole poets and activists. Les Senel is inspired by the natural environment and the people of the Gulf South region, and their music reflects that inspiration. So they'll play a series of songs. The first song, Michi Preval, is a song taken from the Bayou Ballads folk songbook. It's an old Creole tune with a modern touch. The next song will be Bocan Sans Diffé, written and composed by Les Senel. And this song was inspired by the hot summer of 2023 when the region experienced a drought that produced a freshwater shortage that impacted Southeast Louisiana for months. And the last song, Deacon, is a tribute to Denise's grandfather and his garden in the 5th Ward, which you saw. He was the deacon of the Second Cavalcade Church, and this song and others will be featured in the upcoming album Creosote, so a take on creosote, and inspired by this work that continues. It's a sonic work that mixes interviews, song, and the sounds of frontline communities in Houston's and New Orleans. So I invite you to engage all of your senses here, to allow your neuronal pathways to make some new connections, to have this kind of emerge out of this experience with us around this interdisciplinary kind of research across disciplines and cultures, and thinking with this entanglement of technology and culture and the shared challenges of our world. No, we look at the, yeah, because it's the lyrics for the songs.
Danser, Galinda, danser, Galinda, danser, Galinda, danser, Rivali non voglio vedere il mondo, vai fu sotto Rivali capitando poco congegioni delle ceremoni, non sei Galinda, don't say Galinda, don't say Galinda, don't say Galinda, Senso soli curiva tiens di tombe son dans les soli moye sotto Se non rielli corri o polli febrie sopirie continuo a tombe non sei Galinda don't say Galinda, don't say Galinda, don't say Galinda, oh Joe. Galin, 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 Galo, Galin, Galin, Galo. Galin, 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 Gallo, Galing, galing, galo. Galing, galing, motivi. Galing, galing, ibaw tumir. Galing, 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 galo. Galing, 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 galo. Doce Galinda, Doce Galinda, Doce Galinda, Doce Galinda, Viva Odisha, Viva Odisha, Viva Odisha, Mawo, boy, Viva Odisha, Viva Odisha, Viva Odisha, Mawo, boy, 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 boy.
Pardonnez-moi, no tape más, Boriviela, Viviela, avec sous les brières, mettons rentrer la pluie mouillée, pour faire l'oubli, oh, sans cœur, pour faire ça tous les, oh, sans diffère, pour faire d'autres, oh, sans cœur, pour faire ça tous les, pour s'en diffère. Pardonnez-moi, no tape más, por Riviera, Riviera, avec sous les brières, mettons rentrer la pluie mouillée. God and care to face a tourner, who taunts and defend, who fair doctrines, God and care to face a tourner, taunts and defend.
Hahale, haya, oh, haya, hahale, hahale, haya, oh, haya. Ich anhock Albubancha, ich anhock Amayon, Peninat Katon Pistache, Lucky Kankam Ich, Hokti Akon, Luke Belon, Yahik Yanti Peltok Off, Hokti Way, Anung Ush, Koktiwe Anung Bush, Kon Konar Shiwat, Si Makuktukau, Ya, 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 Hahane, Hahane, Aya, Oh, Haya, Hahane, Hahane, Aya, Oh, Haya, Hahane, Hahane, Aya, Oh, Haya.
Si tu imaginer Nampo palmo La mesa gran parente Don fit for H-Town Il travaille un billet. He worked for Anthropocene. Decay. Decay. Decay, yeah. Decay. So no Louisiana. He grew cotton in the backyard. Barbecue, it was always smoking. A la l'Église, c'est dimanche, c'est dimanche. C'est dimanche, c'est dimanche. Il travaille. Back in Inglewood, he rested his bones.
I guess so.
Deacon, yeah.
To face a who comes on the face.
Thank you.